Alright, so a few random notes on the time slider itself before we go any further. So this is the time slider. I talked about it in my last video. It's basically, there's a few parts to it. This one is just showing you a specific range of frames. So like 5 is frame 5, 10 is frame 10, etc. If you ever don't see this in your version of Maya, or you want to turn it off to get a little more room to work with, I'm just gonna, yeah, there's no real reason to do that. But if you go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, you go into UI elements right under Interface, and you can turn off your time slider, your range slider, etc. So if you ever like open Maya and don't see it and you're like, oh crap, where is it? This is where it is. Sometimes if I'm modeling, I turn it off so I can buy myself a little extra space in the scene. Again, personal preference. Just go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and it's under UI elements. So, this little bit down here, this range slider, so there's a few parts to this one, I guess, as well. You have these little number boxes here and over here. The outermost one, so this outer right one, or rightmost box, I don't know, is the maximum number of frames in your scene. So you can just go in if you decide you need more frames and be like, 4,000, and it will just add more frames to your scene. So there's no real, like, limit for this. You can go as many or as little as you need. This one over here is how many frames are, I guess, usually it'll default to start at 1, but you can add, like, negative 300 frames if you need to. And then you can go and be like, okay, great, there's negative frames. Normally you don't do that so much for an animation. It doesn't really hurt anything if you have negative frames, but a lot of times people add them for doing simulations. You can start your simulation before your animation starts, and then just keep keep your actual content on, you know, frame 1s or like more standard frames. So that's the outer boxes there. Again, the total frames in the scene. These inner boxes are just the ones that you're viewing in this particular area here in your time slider. So you can go in and be like, I only want to see from frames 35 to 76, and enter frames manually, and you can see that, again, it's only displaying 35 to 76. You can also go in if you're just sort of looking to do some really rough modifications and just sort of drag this little slider back here. Usually I'll do this unless I want a really specific frame range, but having the ability to not view all of your frames at once is very helpful. Maybe not for like a super short animation, but I have some files with like over 1,000 frames in it, and you physically just can't see all of that at once. It just doesn't work. I'm gonna enter 4,000 in here, and 4,000, and it's just like, you have almost no control over where you're putting things, and it's just awful. So again, that's usually why this is helpful. So you'll also notice that you can enter, if I set this back, say 200, if I enter a value over 200 here, it's going to override this value and just automatically add more frames to your scene. And you can see that it's updated this number as well. But again, all of this is fluid, and it really doesn't super matter what values you enter here. It's not, if you get rid of frames, it's not going to delete the animations there. It's just not really going to let you access them unless you add numbers back in. So hopefully that makes sense for the time slider. It's hopefully fairly straightforward. In the next video, I'm going to talk a little bit about modifying and moving your keyframes in the time slider itself.